Hello and welcome back to Now Read This, the story of King Arthur and his knights by Howard Pyle. Chapter 3rd, How several kings and high dukes essayed to draw the sword out of the anvil, and how they failed. Likewise, how Arthur made the essay and succeeded therein. So, when the morning of Christmas Day had come, many thousands of folk of all qualities, both gentle and simple, gathered together in front of the cathedral for to behold the essay of that sword. Now there had been a canopy of embroidered cloth of divers colours spread above the sword and the anvil, and a platform had been built around about the cube of marble stone. And nigh unto that place there had been a throne for the archbishop established, for the archbishop was to overlook that essay, and to see that every circumstance was fulfilled with due equity and circumspection. So, when the morning was half gone by, the archbishop himself came with great pomp of estate, and took his seat upon the high throne that had been placed for him, and all his court of clerks and knights gathered about him, so that he presented a very proud and excellent appearance of courtliness. Now unto that essay there had gathered 19 kings and 16 dukes, and each of these was of such noble and exalted state that he entertained high hopes that he would that day be approved before the world to be the right king and overlord of all Britain. Wherefore, after the archbishop had established himself upon his throne, there came several of these and made demand that he should straightway put that matter to the test. So the archbishop commanded his herald for to sound a trumpet, and to bid all who had the right to make essay of the sword to come unto that adventure, and the herald did according as the archbishop ordered. And when the herald had sounded his trumpet, there immediately appeared the first of those kings to make trial of the sword, and he who came was King Lot of Orkney and the Isles. With King Lot there came 11 knights and 5 esquires, so that he appeared in very noble estate before the eyes of all. And when King Lot had arrived at that place, he mounted the platform. And first he saluted the archbishop, and then he laid his hands to the pommel of the sword in the sight of all. And he bent his body, and drew upon the sword with great strength, but he could not move the blade in the anvil, even so much as the breadth of a hair, for it stood as fast as the iron in which it was planted. And after that first essay he tried 3 times more, but still he was altogether unable to move the blade in the iron. Then, after that he had thus 4 times made essay, he ceased his endeavour, and came down from that place. And he was filled with great anger and indignation that he had not succeeded in his endeavour. And after King Lot there came his brother-in-law, King Urien of Gore, and he also made essay in the same wise as King Lot had done. But neither did he succeed any better than that other king. And after King Urien there came King Fion of Scotland, and after King Fion there came King Mark of Cornwall, and after King Mark there came King Rience of North Wales, and after King Rience there came King Leodegrance of Cameliard, and after King Urien there came King Fion of Scotland, and after King Fion there came King Mark of Cornwall, and after King Mark there came King Rience of North Wales, and after King Rience there came King Leodegrance of Cameliard, and after him came all those other kings and dukes before enumerated, and not one of all these was able to move the blade. And some of these high and mighty lords were filled with anger and indignation that they had not succeeded, and others were ashamed that they had failed in that undertaking before the eyes of all those who looked upon them. But whether they were angry or whether they were ashamed, it in no wise helped their case. Now when all the kings and dukes had thus failed in that adventure, the people who were there were very much astonished, and they said to one another, "How is this? If all those kings and dukes of very exalted estate have failed to achieve that adventure, who then may hope to succeed? For here have been all those who were most worthy of that high honour, and all have tried to draw that sword, and all have failed. Who then is there now to come after these who may hope to succeed? And likewise, those kings and dukes spoke together in the same manner, and by there came 6 of the most worthy, to wit, King Lot, King Urien, King Pellinore, King Ban, King Rience, and Duke Clarence of Northumberland. And these stood before the throne of the Archbishop, and spake to him in this wise, Sir, here have all the kings and dukes of this realm striven before you to draw forth that sword, and lo, not one of all those who have undertaken that thing hath succeeded in his undertaking. What then? May we understand but that the enchanter Merlin hath set this adventure for to bring shame and discredit upon all of us who are here, and upon you who are the head of the church in this realm. For who in all the world may hope to draw forth a sword blade out of a bed of solid iron? Behold, it is beyond the power of any man. Is it not then plain to be seen that Merlin hath made a mock of us all? Now, therefore, lest all this great congregation should be called here in vain, we do beseech you of your wisdom that you presently choose the one from among the kings here gathered, who may be best fitted to be overlord of this realm. And when ye shall have chosen him, we will promise to obey him in all things, whatsoever he may ordain. Verily, such a choice as that will be better worth while than to spend time in this foolish task of striving to draw forth a sword out of an anvil which no man in all the world may draw forth. Then was the Archbishop much troubled in spirit, for he said to himself, Can it be sooth that Merlin hath deceived me, and hath made a mock of me, and of all these kings and lordly folk? Surely this cannot be. For Merlin is passing wise, and he would not make a mock of all the realm for the sake of so sorry a jest as this would be. Certes, he hath some intent in this of which we know not, being of less wisdom than he, wherefore I will be patient for a while longer. Accordingly, having communed thus within himself, he spake aloud in this wise to those 7 high lords. Messires, he said, I have yet faith that Merlin hath not deceived us, wherefore I pray your patience for one little while longer. For if, in the time a man may count 500 twice over, no one cometh forward to perform this task, then will I, at your behest, proceed to choose one from among you, and will proclaim him king and overlord of all. For the Archbishop had faith that Merlin was about to immediately declare a king before them all. Now leave we these, and turn we unto Arthur and his father and brother. For Merlin had bidden these 3 to abide in their pavilion until such time as he thought would be fit for them to come out thence. And that time being now come, Merlin and Sir Ulfius went to the pavilion of Sir Ector, and Merlin said, Arthur, arise and come forth, for now the hour is come for thee to essay before the whole world that miracle which thou didst of late execute in privacy. So Arthur did as Merlin bade him to do, and he came forth from the pavilion with his father and his brother, and lo, he was like one who walked in a dream. So they 5 went down from thence toward the cathedral unto that place of assay. And when they had come to the congregation, there assembled, the people made way for them, greatly marvelling and saying to one another, Who are these with the enchanter Merlin and Sir Ulfius, and whence come they? For all the world knew Merlin and Sir Ulfius, and they wist that here was something very extraordinary about to happen. And Arthur was clad all in flame-coloured raiment, embroidered with threads of silver, so that others of the people said, Certes, that youth is very fair for to look upon. Now who may he be? But Merlin said no word to any man, but he brought Arthur through the press unto that place where the Archbishop sat, and the press made way for him, so that he was not stayed in his going. And when the Archbishop beheld Merlin come thus with those others, he arose and said, Merlin, who are these whom thou bringest unto us, and what is their business here? And Merlin said, Lord, here is one come to make the assay of yonder sword. And the Archbishop said, Which one is he? And Merlin said, This is he. and he laid his hand upon Arthur. Then the archbishop looked upon Arthur, and he beheld that the youth was very comely of face, wherefore his heart went out unto Arthur, and he loved him a very great deal. And the archbishop said, Merlin, by what right doth this young man come hither? And Merlin made reply, Lord, he cometh hither by the best right that there is in the world, for he who standeth before thee clad in red is the true son of Uther Pendragon, and of his lawful wife, Queen Igraine. Then the archbishop cried out aloud in great amazement, and those who stood nigh, and who heard what Merlin said, were so astonished that they wist not what to think. And the archbishop said, Merlin, what is this that thou tellest me? For who, until now, in all the world, hath ever heard that Uther Pendragon had a son? Unto this Merlin made reply, No one hath ever known of such a thing until now, only a very few. For it was in this wise. When this child was born, the spirit of prophecy lay upon me, and I foresaw that Uther Pendragon would die before a very great while. Wherefore I have feared that the enemies of the king would lay violent hands upon the young child for the sake of his inheritance. So at the king's behest, I and another took the young child from his mother, and gave him unto a third, and that man received the kingly child, and maintained him ever since as his own son. And as to the truth of these things, there are others here who may attest the verity of them. For he who was with me when the young child was taken from his mother was Sir Ulfius, and he to whom he was entrusted was Sir Ector of Bonmaison, and those two witnesses, who are without any reproach, will avouch to the verity of that which I have asserted. For here they stand before thee to certify unto what I have said. And Sir Ulfius and Sir Ector said, All that Merlin hath spoken is true, and thereunto we do pledge our most faithful and sacred word of honour. Then the archbishop said, Who is there may doubt the word of such honourable witnesses? And he looked upon Arthur, and smiled upon him. Then Arthur said, Have I then thy leave, Lord, to handle yonder sword? And the archbishop said, Thou hast my leave, and may the grace of God go with thee to do thy endeavour. Thereupon Arthur went to the cube of marble stone, and he laid his hands upon the haft of the sword that was thrust into the anvil. And he bent his body, and drew very strongly, and lo, the sword came forth with great ease, and very smoothly. And when he had got the sword into his hands, he swung it about his head, so that it flashed like lightning. And after he had swung it thus thrice about his head, he set the point thereof against the face of the anvil, and bore upon it very strongly. And behold, the sword slid very smoothly back again into that place where it had aforetime stood. And when it was there, midway deep, it stood fast where it was. And thus did Arthur successfully accomplish that marvellous miracle of the sword in the eyes of all the world. Now when the people who were congregated at that place beheld this miracle performed before their faces, they lifted up their voices all together, and shouted so vehemently, and with so huge a tumult of outcry, that it was as though the whole earth rocked and trembled with the sound of their shouting. And whiles they so shouted, Arthur took hold of the sword again, and drew it forth, and swung it again, and again drave it back into the anvil. And when he had done that, he drew it forth a third time, and did the same thing as before. Thus it was that all those who were there beheld that miracle performed 3 times over. And all the kings and dukes who were there were filled with great amazement, and they wist not what to think or to say when they beheld one who was little more than a boy perform that undertaking in which the best of them had failed. And some of them, seeing that miracle, were willing to acknowledge Arthur because of it, but others would not acknowledge him. These withdrew themselves and stood aloof, and as they stood thus apart, they said among themselves, What is this? And who can accredit such a thing, that a beardless boy should be set before us all, and should be made king and overlord of this great realm, for to govern us? Nay, nay, we will have none of him for our king. And others said, Is it not apparent that Merlin and Sir Ulfius are thus exalting this unknown boy, so that they may elevate themselves along with him? Thus these discontented kings spake among themselves, and of all of them the most bitter were King Lot and King Urien, who were brothers by marriage with Arthur. Now, when the archbishop perceived the discontent of these kings and dukes, he said to them, "How now, messires? Are you not satisfied?" And they said, "We are not satisfied." And the archbishop said, "What would you have?" And they said, "We would have another sort of king for Britain than a beardless boy, of whom no one knoweth, and of whose birthright there are only 3 men to attest." And the archbishop said, "What of that? Hath he not performed the miracle that ye yourselves assayed, and failed to perform?" But these high and mighty lords would not be satisfied, but with angry and averted faces they went away from that place, filled with wrath and indignation. But others of these kings and dukes came and saluted Arthur, and paid him court, giving him joy of that which he had achieved. And the chiefest of those who came thus unto him in friendliness was King Leodegrance of Cameliard. And all the multitude acknowledged him, and crowded around that place shouting, so that it sounded like the noise of thunder. Now all this while Sir Ector and Sir Kay had stood upon one side, and they were greatly weighed down by sorrow, for it appeared to them that Arthur had, of a sudden, been uplifted so far from their estate that they might never hope to approach him more. For now he was of kingly consequence, and they but common knights. And after a while Arthur beheld them where they stood, with downcast looks, whereupon he straightway went to them, and took first one and then the other by the hand, and kissed each upon the cheek. Thereupon they were again very glad at being thus uplifted unto him. And when King Arthur departed from that place, great crowds of people followed after him, so that the streets were altogether filled with the press of people. And the multitude continually gave him loud acclaim as the chosen king of England, and those who were nearest to him sought to touch the hem of his garments. Wherefore the heart of Arthur was exceedingly uplifted with great joy and gladness, so that his soul took wing and flew like a bird into the sky. And I love this quote here. It's like basically almost the end of the chapter, but I love Howard Pyle will kind of like, this book was written for children in the 1900s, which is wonderful. But he always sort of like ends a chapter or a section with a quote that he makes up. And it's almost like a prayer, and I love it. Thus Arthur achieved the adventure of the sword that day, and entered into his birthright of royalty. Wherefore may God grant his grace unto you all, that ye too may likewise succeed in your undertakings. For any man may be a king in that life in which he is placed, if so be he may draw forth the sword of success from out of the iron of circumstance. Wherefore, when your time of assay cometh, I do hope it may be with you as it was with Arthur that day, and that ye too may achieve success with entire satisfaction unto yourself, and to your great glory and perfect happiness. Amen. Conclusion. Now after all these things had happened, there was much talk among men, and great confusion and tumult. For while some of the kings, and nearly all the multitude, said, Lo, here is a king come to us, as it were, from out of heaven, for to bring peace unto our distracted land. Yet other kings, and they were of greater number, said, Who is this beardless boy, who cometh with a claim to be high king of Britain? Who ever heard of him before? We will have none of him, except upon further trial, and upon greater avouchment. So, for the sake of peace, the archbishop ordained that another assay of the sword should be made at Candlemas. And here again all those who endeavoured to draw forth the sword failed thereat, but Arthur drew it forth several times very easily in the sight of all. And after that a third trial was made at Easter, and after that a fourth trial was made at Pentecost. And at all these trials Arthur repeatedly drew out the sword from the anvil, and no one but he could draw it forth. And after that fourth trial, Sundry of the kings, and many of the lesser barons and knights, and all of the commons cried out that these were trials enough, and that Arthur had assuredly proved himself to be rightwise king. Wherefore they demanded that he should be made king indeed, so that he might rule over them. For it had come to pass that whithersoever Arthur went, great crowds followed after him, hailing him as the true son of Uther Pendragon, and rightwise overlord of Britain. Wherefore the archbishop, seeing how the people loved Arthur, and how greatly they desired him for their king, ordained that he should be appointed and crowned unto royal estate. And so it was done at the great cathedral. And some say that the cathedral was St. Paul's, and some say that it was not. But when Arthur had thus been crowned, all those who were opposed unto his kingship withdrew themselves in great anger, and immediately set about to prepare war against him. But the people were with Arthur, and joined with him, and so also did several kings, and many of the lesser barons and knights. And with the advice of Merlin, Arthur made friends and allies of sundry other kings, and they and he fought 2 great wars with his enemies, and won both of these wars. And in the second war was fought a very famous battle nigh to the forest of Bedegraine, wherefore it was called the Battle of Bedegraine. And in that battle Arthur overthrew his enemies so entirely that it was not possible for them ever to hope to unite in war against him again. And of King Lot, his brother-in-law, King Arthur brought 2 of his sons to court for to dwell there and to serve as hostages of peace thereafter. And these 2 were Gawain and Gaheris, and they became, after a while, very famous and accomplished knights. And of King Urien, his other brother-in-law, Arthur brought unto court his one son, Iwain, for to hold as an hostage of peace. And he also became in time a very famous and accomplished knight. And because of these hostages, there was peace thereafter betwixt those 3 kingly brothers for all time. And a certain very famous king and knight, hight King Pellinore, who was one of his enemies, Arthur drove out of his possessions and away from the habitations of men and into the forest. And King Rience, who was another of his enemies, he drave into the mountains of North Wales, and other kings who were his enemies he subjugated to his will, so that all the land was at such peace that it had not enjoyed the like since the days of Uther Pendragon. And King Arthur made Sir Kay his seneschal, as he had promised to do, and he made Sir Ulfius his chamberlain, and Merlin he made his counsellor, and Sir Bodwain of Britain he made his constable. And these men were all of such a sort as greatly enhanced the glory and renown of his reign, and established him upon his throne with entire security. Now when the reign of King Arthur became thus entirely established, and when the renown of his greatness became to be known in the world, many men of noble souls and of large spirit and of high knightly prowess, knights who desired above all things to achieve glory at arms and courts of chivalry, perceived that great credit and exaltation of estate were likely to be won under such a king. So it fell out that from all parts, by little and little, there began together such a court of noble, honourable knights about King Arthur as men never beheld before that time, and shall happily never behold again. For even to this day the history of these good knights is known to the greater part of mankind. Yea, the names of many kings and emperors have passed away and have been forgotten, but the names of Sir Galahad, and Sir Lancelot of the Lake, and Sir Tristram of Lyonesse, and Sir Percival of Gales, and Sir Gawain, and of Sir Ewain, and of Sir Bors de Ganis, and of many others of that noble household of worthy brotherhood, is still remembered by men. Wherefore, I think that it is very likely that so long as words shall be written, the performances of these worthies shall be remembered. So, in this history yet to be written, I have set it for my task to inform him who reads this book of many of these adventures, telling him, besides, such several circumstances as I do not believe are known unto everybody, And by, when I shall tell of the establishment of the Round Table, I shall set forth a tabulated list of a number of those worthies who at this time assembled at the court of Arthur as men chosen to found that order of the Round Table, and who for that reason were entitled the ancient and honourable companions of the Round Table. For through this entire history chiefly concerneth King Arthur, yet the glory of these great honourable knights was his glory, and his glory was their glory. Wherefore one cannot tell of the glory of King Arthur without also telling of the glory of those noble gentlemen aforesaid. Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.